This month marks the second anniversary of the launch of the Chartered Insurance Institute's Ordinary Declaration, an initiative aimed at driving the professionalism agenda in the general insurance market. Since then, there has been a lot of discussion and debate about the potential benefits of attaining chartered status. But now, 24 months on, there has been enough time for it to bed down within organisations, for us to start to delve deeper and to find out whether the predicted benefits have in fact materialised and what it's meant for insurers in practical terms. My name is Jonathan Swift, the Editor-in-Chief of Post Magazine and Insurance Age, and I'd like to welcome you all to this interactive webinar in conjunction with the Chartered Insurance Institute, which will aim to look at these issues more closely, but also to find out whether it's filtered down to the intermediaries these insurers work with and also the end consumers. Now, to join me for this discussion, I'm pleased to welcome Stuart Payne, Vice President, Chubb Europe, Steve Jenkins, Director, Financial Services and Insurance Markets within the CII Group, Amanda Blanc, the CEO of AXA Commercial and Deputy President of the Chartered Insurance Institute, and finally, Stephen Lewis, the CEO of Zurich's UK General Insurance Business. But before we get to them, we must stress that for you all to get the most out of this interactive webinar, there are a number of ways in which you can get involved. In front of your screens, you will have a tab which will allow you to submit a question at any point during the discussion for our esteemed colleagues to talk about. There will also be 4 interactive poll questions, which will also allow us to stir some debate. On which note, I'd like to introduce the first poll question now. And this poll question: what do you believe is the best way to demonstrate professionalism to your clients in today's market? And there are 4 possible answers here. By being a signatory to the Ordinary Declaration, by promoting your employees' chartered credentials and ethical code of conduct, by becoming a corporate chartered firm, and finally, other. Now, we will come to the answers for that poll question in about 10 minutes. But now, to kick off this discussion, I suppose one of the best places for us to start is really to understand the broad reasoning for each of your firm's decisions to brace in chartered status. And it would only be fair to come to you first, Stuart, as Chubb was the first insurer to be awarded chartered status. So what were the drivers behind this move?
Thank you, Jonathan. Chubb, as a niche insurer, prides itself on professionalism and expertise. And the signing of the Ordinary Declaration and hence subsequently becoming chartered insurer is just evidence of this professional standing.
Okay. Perhaps I can now turn to you, Amanda. What has it meant for AXA Commercial?
I think for AXA Commercial it means 2 things really. Firstly, from an internal perspective, it shows to the staff how committed we are to professionalism and to training and development, and it almost sets the standard for where we are and where we want to maintain. But also to our customers, it shows that we're serious about it, and that the people that we have dealing with them are going to be well trained and professional. So I think it's positive internally, it shows we're serious, but also externally to the brokers for them to pass on to their customers.
Stephen, obviously Zurich is an interesting case study because you sought recognition across the entirety of general insurance business, making you the first composite general insurer to achieve this chartered status. What was your reason to go the whole hog on this?
Well, I think, Jonathan, it just really builds on what Stuart and Amanda talked to. I mean, the business we're in is one which is, professional insurance provision. I always talk about insurance as being very much a skills-based game. And ultimately going for chartered status is attaining that stamp that recognises the technical standards we aspire to as an organisation, and therefore it resonates internally for our staff, but it also resonates externally as well in terms of the expertise we bring to the market. So for us it's quite important to look at it quite holistically in the context of our entire organisation and really set a stake in the ground in terms of what we aspire for and what we aspire to deliver. So that was really the rationale, if you like, core to why we went for chartered status.
If I can turn to you then finally, Steve, from a CII perspective, have these sentiments been borne out by the other insurers in the market? Has the take-up exceeded expectation, met expectation, or disappointed so far?
I certainly don't think it's disappointed. I think that chartered status has now gaining a real momentum amongst some of the larger broking firms, and as you've seen around this table, some of the major insurers as well. And if I look back to BIBA in 2010, for example, where we saw a number of regional brokers acquire chartered status, but a lot of them at that point were telling us that what would really make the difference is when the insurers actually embraced the whole concept of chartered status themselves. And I think over the last couple of years, we've seen some massive strides in that regard. And I think it says two things about an organisation. Internally, it's going to give an indication of the kind of organisation, what an organisation is like to work for. I think it'll strengthen an organisation's position in retaining good staff and attracting people into a career-orientated environment. And from brokers' perspectives, I think it says something about the organisation as well in terms of its brand.
The words kind of internal and staff have been mentioned quite a lot during that kind of opening questions there. Can any of you go into more detail about how staff have reacted within your organisations? Perhaps I'll come to you on that first, Amanda. And we can...
Yeah, I mean, I think I was actually with a bunch of the staff this morning, and I said to them, you know, what do you feel about being chartered? And the word they use is proud. They just say we're very, very proud to be able to say that we're chartered. So for me, you know, you can't really measure that. It's not tangible. But they certainly, there's a sense of we belong to an organisation that's made the effort to become chartered, and they feel they're very pleased about that. They're very proud. But also, in a tangible sense, it sets a structure to development. So, you know, it has tangible and intangible benefits, I think.
And maybe just building on what Amanda said, I mean, from our perspective, it does recognise an investment in our people. And ultimately, you know, we've got a responsibility to our people in the context of continuous development, and their responsibility also is to be the best that they can be in the context of the way we serve our customers. So I think the duality of that works really well in the context of the whole chartered wrapper.
I think in addition to what you both shared with the viewers there, is also it gives our staff a career. Even when they're electing to come into insurance as their career, it's something that's substantive, something that is concrete, something that they can aspire to. And with the organisations who have achieved chartered status, it enables them to look to those organisations, yep, they're the companies I want to work for.
And Stuart, for a firm who's been obviously chartered for over a year now, I mean, have you seen benefits with regard to retention within staff and the take-up in exams?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, staff attraction, staff retention, chartered insurer status has improved that. Staff taking up exams, I think it's kind of self-perpetuating. People see other staff doing their exams, the various stages to becoming professionally qualified. It's like keeping up with the Joneses to a certain degree. They see people moving on their career and want to do likewise. Certainly throughout our underwriting centre, all staff at some stage are doing the various levels of exams, and they all want to be the best they possibly can be.
I think we do, though, need to recognise that what we're really doing here is re-energising professionalism in our industry. And I think if we all look to when we joined the industry 20 years or so ago, it was a natural course that when you joined as a graduate, etc., you expected to complete your CI examinations. I think if I look to the last 10 years of the industry, it's one that I'd probably characterise as stripping of cost. And in the context of that, you know, some of the natural things that are the lifeblood of our industry have been switched off. Mm-hmm. Some of that is around, clearly, technical training and graduate programmes, etc. And so I think what the industry has recognised over the last 2 or 3 years is that we've got to, again, rekindle professionalism within the industry per se. So we are at the start of somewhat a journey that builds on a very strong foundation of the past, but has probably had a little bit of a dip over the last 10 years or so. And it's part of the, it's incumbent upon the industry now to bring that professionalism back to our industry.
I think that's right, but if we talk about retaining staff, it's important, but attracting staff, it's very important. If you're going out into, in particular now, schools, where you've got 18-year-olds who are deciding do they go to university or do they come and go into the job market. If you've got something, a qualification that you can say, well, actually, this is equivalent to a degree or whatever, then I think it gives them something that encourages them to join your organisation. So it means you get talented people in. So I think it does definitely help to attract people, no doubt about it. And if you can say you're chartered and therefore it's a firm commitment, it means you've got a much better chance of getting some good people. And for me, that's that's really exciting.
I think in a sense, what we're talking about here is parity of esteem. making people feel good about what it is they do for a living. Are they part of a profession? Do they have parity of esteem with friends and family that might be working in the more traditional professions? And I think it's also important to remember that whilst qualifications are an obvious element and a key element of professional standards, they aren't the be-all and end-all. Professionalism is much more broad concept, focused very much on continued relevant education so that people can build their careers relevant to their roles over a period of time. But also the foundation stone of professionalism is also about behaviours and conduct and the way in which people act and the way in which that aligns to company values and sort of behaviours. It's not just what you do and what you deliver, it's how you go about it. And that has a major impact on what the customer feels by way of their experience with an insurer and a broker as well.
Stuart, you wanted to come in there?
Yeah, I think that, yes, it does offer a career and sort of either achieving or maintaining chartered status. There's certain obligations on us as insurers, but there are also very tangible benefits to us as well. For example, yes, staff want to pursue their own careers, become professionally qualified, commensurate with the level that they want to achieve in their career, but also what the structure does do for us. It allows our staff to have that wide grounding in insurance so that the right decisions can be made. They're educated decisions, be it either from an underwriting standpoint or indeed from a claim standpoint, because that, at the end of the day, we all work for an organisation who are there to make some money. We're not charities. And, the difference is on those decisions that our staff make at that point in time.
And can I just ask, perhaps I'll come to you on this, Stuart, because you started probably perhaps a bit earlier. What was the journey like to achieve charter status? Was it quite a difficult journey, or was it a journey which kind of people rode with quite quickly and got into very, very early on?
I found it quite refreshing, to be honest with you. I reflect on my own career. I wanted to work for an organisation, a professional organisation, and so all through my early career was looking towards becoming a chartered professional, both with the Insurance Institute and as a chartered loss adjuster as well. And the background that I had was very much study, get a broad education in insurance, and it'll stand you in good stead. And that is within Chubb, all our staff have a very dedicated learning and development programme. And really the Aldermary Declaration was, as I said right at the beginning of this discussion, was a natural step, natural progression. And then for chartered status, it was really just encapsulating all that and putting it in a format which reflects what we're actually doing within our organisation.
Was there a certain kind of kudos in being the first? Were you driving staff on with that kind of carrot there to kind of reach?
Not being very competitive, yes. Of course, it's nice to be the first, and I can't deny that there was that carrot there for me on Chubb.
Was that kind of experience with Amanda within AXA Commercial?
I mean, for me, it was a really obvious progression. Obviously, I'd come from Towergate, and Towergate were chartered, and I'd seen the benefits that brought with it. So, it was almost a day one decision. We would do it. And to be perfectly honest, it's quite easy to get the staff behind you in something like this. It's not a contentious area. Everybody wants to feel part of something like this. So it was a relatively straightforward process. Obviously helped a lot by the CII and the way that the CII work with you to get through the process, and that makes it a lot easier.
Okay, perhaps come to you then, Stephen. Obviously, within Zurich, you actually had the ambition there to be number one, I suppose, as the composite general insurer. Did you find the kind of journey to be in any way difficult or problematic?
I don't think so. I think it builds on what sort of Stuart and Amanda spoke about. I mean, it's a natural progression at one level. And again, if I look back, into the history of Zurich, I mean, you've got Zurich, you've also got Eagle Star, which is sort of an underpin to Zurich as well. Very much aligned with CIO for many, many years. And so there's a very, very strong base of, technical standards underpinned by the whole CII relationship. I think it did wane somewhat over a period, as I've articulated, but for us it was a natural progression to really turn the screws somewhat in the context of really re-energising ourselves as an organisation and really doing it from the perspective of the development of our people. And it's a two-way street, it's a two-way contract in real terms, in terms of what our people give to the organisation, but what we can give to them. And it was just a natural progression to put the right wrapper around technical standards and professionalism, and something that our people genuinely bought into very rapidly.
Did you find that that kind of ethos was shared across the whole of the Zurich kind of general insurance business, and different kind of, I suppose, silos there?
I wouldn't necessarily use the word silos, but yes, we're made up of an amalgam of businesses from big ticket global corporate right through into our personal lines. I think we have to recognise that different businesses in the market are structured in different ways, and that enables you to do different things. And therefore, we're not the size of an RBSI in terms of retail personal lines, so we're a more modest size on the personal lines. And when you put that together with our mid-market commercial business and our big global corporate business, we were able to put the wrapper around the aggregate whole in terms of professional standards. It was the right thing to do for us as an organisation in terms of where we stood at this time.
Can I just ask, outside your firms, have there been any benefits regarding the customer and policyholder engagement, whether personal or commercial? Perhaps I'll come to you on that, Amanda.
Yeah, I think it's difficult because we're a largely intermediated business to sense what the end customer impact's going to be. But we would very much see our customer as being the broker, and for sure it has allowed a greater and deeper engagement with the broker. And I think especially those brokers that are chartered. I was doing some work on this the other day. Over 30% of our written premium is with brokers who are chartered. So it's a fair proportion of our broking population, and therefore there's definitely empathy between the two chartered organisations if you're both chartered. And it provokes a lot of discussion and debate for those brokers that are not chartered. They'll ask, well, why did you do that? And what benefits are there? So I do think it opens up dialogue that wasn't there before.
Perhaps I come to you on that, Stuart.
Yeah, I think totally agree with you there, Amanda. I think two additional items from my perspective and from Chubb's perspective is one, other chartered organisations outside in the insurance industry want to also work with like-minded corporations, and so we found that we've attracted business by being a chartered insurer from other chartered accountants and the like. And I think secondly, when we talk about who's our customer, using the broker as our customer in this instance, I think what chartered status does do, it builds that element of trust. And that they have trust in the decision making, be it underwriting decisions or claims decisions. They have trust that is a professional expert that is actually dealing with their particular matter.
I think it's probably worth just picking up some figures that we've done from a survey. You asked about consumers and policyholders, end customers. We surveyed over the last few months the existing chartered insurance broker firms, and over 3/4 of them are of the view that chartered status has played a significant part in improving perceptions of their business in the eyes of peer groups of professionals. So Stuart's reference to lawyers and accountants, for example, and referring business to them. Chartered status is starting to give chartered broking firms parity of esteem in that peer group. And that's from a relatively early, we're still at a relatively early stage in the life of chartered brokers. If we can actually continue to invest in that, I think momentum will build yet further. So that initially the feeling is largely internal in terms of kind of how the feeling of well-being and pride, and that now is starting to sort of manifest itself in terms of strengthening of external business relationships.
I'd say from a Zurich perspective, I'd have to be honest and say it's still early days. Dialogue still fairly limited. I think we recognise those that are clearly within the chartered club, so to speak. And I think, it's much more, from our perspective, it started with a view to the professionalism of our organisation and what we stand for. I think over time we will get traction as an industry towards recognising the entire insurance model and all players being chartered within it. But I think we are at the start of that journey, and I think it's got the right sort of traction. But I think from our perspective, I'd say it's quite early days at the moment.
Amanda, you mentioned obviously intermediaries before. And coming back to intermediaries, they obviously are a very important part of your work. Do you think the message is getting through to the intermediaries?
I think on the intermediaries, the way I see it is that the message is getting through to the bigger organisations. So it seems to be getting through to those that are either part of a bigger organisation like Bluefin, Towergate, Willis Network, but but from my mind, where we seem to be missing out is it getting through to the smaller region independent brokers. So, where they're connected to an association, the broker's either part of a network or an association or part of a bigger broker, it seems to have caught on. Where I think we really need to do some work, and probably in conjunction, and we can help the CII with that, is the smaller region independent broker who I don't think are as engaged as they could be. So you've got exceptions to that rule, people like Thomas Carroll, who are hyper-professional in Wales, and they've done a lot of work there. But we've still got some work to do, I think, in the regions. That would be my take.
Do you think, is there any reason why you think that might be the case? Or?
I think it's just a timing thing. I do think that maybe some of the smaller brokers are put off by, it looks quite onerous. Actually, when you understand it, most of those brokers are extremely professional and they would meet the criteria easily, and they would be able to do it. But I do think it's a timing thing. But I also think that we have to learn from the last 2 years, and I think we could refocus our communication.
Yeah,
I think now that organisations like Zurich, AXA are joined up, I think there is a bigger opportunity to use the insurers to help with that.
Yeah, and that I'd agree with that. I think that if we were to look back, and we can see, just to sort of reinforce what Amanda has just mentioned, is that some of the large, well-established regional broking firms that have infrastructures of their own, and with whom we've already got existing relationships, for example, and have had for some time. They're the ones that have led the charge, but the real challenge for CII now is to get to the smaller intermediary firms. It may well be that as a result of the insurers now achieving chartered status themselves, that we can work more proactively with the insurers on those kind of initiatives. I also think that it's incumbent upon the CII to ensure that the CII moves with the times in terms of continually reviewing and reinvesting in the whole concept of chartered. It's probably worth mentioning that if you look at the qualifications piece that sits as one key component of chartered status, there's no good us just continuing to have qualifications that perhaps need to be updated. They need to be tests of knowledge in areas that are relevant to the roles that are emerging in insurers, for example, and that's been part of the driver over the last few years for us to kind of update and review the general insurance exam framework. It's really, really important that when you delve down into chartered status, that the component parts of it place obligation and tests on organisations and individuals that are stretching, but they are still relevant to the roles that people are doing. And new roles emerge, new skills are required of people, and in that sense, the professional body, the CII, needs to ensure that its tests of knowledge reflect those challenges as they emerge.
Can I come to you on that, Stuart? The intermediaries. I mean, do you think it's very important for, I suppose, the insurers to be seen to be very kind of a leading light here, really, kind of help the brokers believe that something's actually happening, I suppose, in the kind of wider market?
Yeah, I think, again, touching on what Amanda described with the regional brokers, it's a very competitive market out there, and I think that the brokers, offer excellent service, and in some cases it just takes one person to have that little bit of initiative within an organisation, say yes, let's go for it, and these are the benefits that go hand in hand with becoming a chartered insurer or a chartered broker. And I think once you get over this initial hurdle of how much administration possibly could be associated with it, and find out that it's not actually a barrier to achieving chartered status, because a lot of those brokers will actually be ticking all the boxes, if you like, to be able to become chartered anyway.
Is there often the case that within the intermediary kind of market, they're looking at brokers, I suppose, to give them some kind of incentives to become chartered? I mean, I know they've been talked about before about perhaps insurers actually kind of offering products and services which essentially are there only for people who kind of attain that chartered status. I don't know if you want to come on that first. Perhaps come to you on that first, Amanda.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's certainly something that we've looked at. And we've developed a suite of products for chartered brokers, which include things like a charter broker academy, a charter broker talent management program, a charter broker product development group. With them being, as I say, a fairly significant part of our business, we think it's really important to do that. So I think there is an opportunity to do that. Not leaving aside, you don't want to forget about all the other brokers who are important to you too. But clearly, if you're like-minded, then there's opportunities to work together. And I think we'd be missing an opportunity if we didn't do that.
Though ultimately we've got to look to the broader opportunity. As we've discussed before, we've got the majority of the insurers in play now, and we need to look at how we create the next wave so that we bring the rest of the intermediary environment into play. Because ultimately it's in all of our interests to be recognised for the professional standards that ultimately we want to deliver to the end customer. And I often sit out there talking to regional brokers, etc., and we all talk about it's a highly competitive market. Are we not just becoming more commoditised? Well, in part we become more commoditised if we don't become more expert, right? And how you actually embrace chartered status, drive professional standards allows you to ultimately delineate yourself from the next, how you create the right marriage of technical capabilities between insurer and ultimately broker in the way they deploy unique products and solutions to market, ultimately has to be underpinned by professional standards. And I think it's that type of message that we've got to get into the environment so that we drive the organisation to the right place.
Would you agree with that, Steve?
I think that's right. I think that's an important point. What's also struck me over the last few months is that we've had as the buying processes of SMEs and larger customers become more formalised. I can see chartered status playing a key role in when brokers outline their credentials to potential customers as part of the procurement process. Much in the same way as how do you invest in your people? People, IIP would have been an example about as to evidence how people would actually, organisations would evidence how they invest in their people. But chartered status, I think, can play a key role in that now. Underpinning that, of course, is how important it is for chartered firms to communicate to their stakeholders, prospective as well as existing customers, what being chartered means, how that actually manifests itself in the expertise of their people, how that manifests itself in the way in which their people behave and educate themselves over a period of time. In fact, I know it's not it's an unusual example, but we were approached directly by one major buying group, for example, that wanted to understand more about what chartered status was all about and how it might seek to question prospective suppliers about their approach to chartered status and whether that was something that they invested in the staff in respect of. So early days, but I can see as momentum builds and as we get real critical mass, the way in which we can leverage chartered status as a profession as a whole needs to be explored more, and the CII will play a very active role in that.
Stuart, come to you. Obviously, again, you're a heavily intermediated insurance company.
No, I mean, I agree with what Steve has to say on the matter. I think it's all part of making the whole industry more professional and recognised for being professional. There have been times over the years where the insurance industry has, people outside the industry have certain views on insurance, and it's one way that we can market our industry in a very, very positive way.
I'd just like to point out to the viewers now there's been an issue currently with the poll questions, so if you're having problems submitting your answer, I have to apologise. That doesn't mean that you cannot actually submit your questions to the esteemed panel. We'll be very happy to answer your questions in a bit. So if you get thinking about your questions, submit them now and we'll come on to those shortly. Obviously, the kind of on the broker issue, I mean, did you think, it's been mentioned here about the smaller brokers. There might be an issue with some of the smaller brokers. Do you think that is a case that these people are essentially never going to be converted, never can be convinced by the kind of benefits of chartered, and the fact that the insurers, no matter what they do for these people, they'll always just think that it's the large insurers essentially, I don't know, doing their thing, but they're really only aimed at the larger brokers?
I think it's largely one of communication. And, I do recognise that we, as I mentioned earlier, have got a role to play in at the CII. A survey that we conducted recently of broking firms that were not chartered showed that it wasn't awareness that was the issue. In fact, 83% of all the brokers that we surveyed are aware of chartered status. The issue for us is explaining what that means and working with smaller brokers in the way that we've done with the larger ones to say, where are you now in terms of your qualifications? Where would you need to be, and how big is that gap? And in many, many cases, I suspect that the gap isn't quite as large as perhaps some people thought that it would be. So now that we've got critical mass amongst the major insurers, I'm sure that there are opportunities for us to work together there, because the CII centrally has certain resource, but not unlimited resource. But I do think there's an opportunity for us to be a bit more proactive in terms of explaining to small firms exactly what's involved and how they go about things.
Perhaps I come to you with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a case of prioritisation. I imagine that there are an awful lot of small brokers out there at the minute who are fighting very hard every day, renewing customers, trying to win new customers. You know, it's economically a pretty difficult time. And I don't think, I think it is a case of communication. I don't think it's a case of not wanting to do it or thinking it's not for them. I think it's just a case of, you know, at this point in time, my priority is this, and I need to focus on it with my limited resource. That's where I think we can help jointly, the insurers and the CII, to say actually it's probably not as difficult as you think, and actually it may help you with winning and retaining customers rather than anything else, rather than being a distraction. So I don't think that they don't want to do it. I definitely don't. I think the brokers do want to do it. I think they just need a bit of help.
And I think it's also important to remember that chartered status, it's got to feel a bit uncomfortable to trying. It's got to be a stretch. It's not got to be something that's just something that's automatic. It's got to be something that an organisation has to make some kind of change to go about achieving. And once it's got to make sure that it continually invests in people to keep hold of it. It's something that you can actually lose as well as gain. So it's striking that balance between making something achievable on the one hand, but stretching on the other hand, so that it has a value to those that have got it as well as those that want it. So that kind of balance is important. But I think fundamentally the issue is around communications now to people.
Okay. We are now starting to get some questions through, so thank you all for taking the time there. And the first question is from Jill Nichols of Newline Group. And I'll come to you first on this, Steve, because I think it's really kind of aimed at you. Not that I'm putting you on the spot or anything. We're kind of, obviously we're talking a lot here about, I suppose, the kind of composite and the regional insurance companies. But Jill wants to know about, you know, are there any kind of major Lloyd's syndicates signing up? Are they seeking to do chart status? And are they aiming to, you know, go to their brokers through that as well?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And indeed, we have spent a considerable period of time talking to Lloyd's and some of the major firms within Lloyd's, and so we're starting to see increased amount of interest from that market. Now, Hiscox, for example, is one of the major players. Aspen and others have recently spent more time working with us around this kind of area. But more work to do, I think, would be fair. You know, it's like in any part of the market, you'll get some organisations that want to embrace things relatively early and some that take it a little bit more persuading. Some of the areas that we've had with Lloyd's that's needed a lot of explanation is different terminology, slightly different roles that exist within the Lloyd's market from the regional market, and how chartered status might apply in that. But in terms of momentum, a lot more interest over the last 6-12 months.
And obviously, I'm sure Chubb obviously has a Lloyd's syndicate and operates in the London market. Do you find that there's as much interest within that part of the business?
I think so. With our syndicate 1882, I think it really ties in with what Steve was just saying there, using certain terminology, make it more applicable to that business environment. But just with our underwriting and with our claims department, we are looking to ensure that we achieve charter status in every business area that we can.
And obviously, Stephen, you're obviously we talked earlier about the whole entirety of Zurich has achieved this charter status, including your kind of global corporate business, which operates in the London market.
Correct. So, again, I think, you know, what the panel's alluding to is that we haven't got as much traction as we would like within the sort of more Lloyd's syndicate space. I think there are conversations ongoing. When I look at it from an internal perspective in terms of our global corporate business, again, the reason we went for the entire wrapper on the organisation is a recognition of the desire to have the right technical standards, if you like, you know, kite marked for want of a better term. I know it's not a kite mark. So it's more of our internal position of the expertise we want to deploy even in that space, and that's why we went for it as an entire organisation. I think it's fair to say there's still more work to do, as Steve has articulated, in the context of bringing you know, the Lloyd's market fully on the journey of where we aspire to be.
Are there any other areas, Steve, that perhaps are lagging behind? Perhaps the retail personalised market has been mentioned previously.
Yeah, and I think that the retail market, if you were to generalise, where we've had most traction, most success has been in the commercial lines area. Initially amongst the major commercial lines brokers, more recently, as you can see, amongst the commercial lines insurers. The real challenge for us, and this applies really to ordinary declaration, frankly, as well as chartered status, is how can we really embrace the retail sector? Because whilst internally, within the marketplace, We're heavily focused on commercial lines, and in fact that is the home turf, if I can describe it, of the CII. To the outside world, they'll judge the success of chartered status or ordinary declaration on retail as much as they will commercial. Now there are some notable exceptions. We obviously Stephen as Chief Chartered Status for the whole of Zurich's UK operations. Other organisations that we're dealing with in the retail sector, the RBSI, Direct Line Group as well, is invested heavily in professional standards. Tesco Bank, a relatively new entrant, has focused on driving qualifications amongst large numbers of frontline staff. But I would like that to be the norm in retail rather than it to be a series of notable, honourable exceptions. And to that end, CII is focusing quite heavily now on what does it need to do itself, what do we need to do at the CII to ensure that we are relevant not just to our traditional home turf of the commercial lines market, but to other areas that may require us to move faster. Lloyd's might be one, but where we have had some very significant recent success, retail certainly is probably the real litmus test for us.
Do you think any of that is to do with the fact that there have been kind of polls which have suggested that end consumers, the public, perhaps are not as well aware of the charter status as perhaps we would like them to be, and essentially they are the retail customers, kind of, they're the end client. They're not going through the broker channel, which we've already established there's actually quite a lot of traction there. The end consumers are the people who actually, because they don't recognise the charter status, it doesn't really put any emphasis or motivation for those retail insurers to go.
Well, we have done some consumer research, and of all the descriptors, if I can describe it with you, a fellow, degree, graduate, chartered, certified, and bear in mind that for the end consumer, they don't even draw the same distinctions as we do between general insurance and financial advice. To them, it's just all financial services in the round. But chartered does stand out as having some connotation or some link in some way to standards or professionalism, probably driven by chartered accountants and other more traditional chartered professionals. But harnessing that and really gaining critical mass where we can, initially in the commercial market, but then recognising what other markets we need to actually make ourselves relevant for is key. It comes back to the journey that Stephen described earlier on. We haven't been a genuine profession for hundreds of years, like law and like medicine and accountancy. But that doesn't mean that we don't have the prospect or the potential to do just that. You need a critical mass of people to lead that charge, and this is where we are at the moment. And if we can try and maintain that momentum and have other people join that movement, then we will actually achieve what we want to do.
Stephen, what's your kind of thoughts? And obviously, you within Zurich, you have a direct-to-consumer business there.
Yeah, but as I said earlier, I mean, still relatively modest in size to some of the big players in the market, and you've always got to put that into context. And I think it goes back to what Steve articulated. I mean, the heartland is commercial. We've got clear traction in the industry to look at retail as a developing wave, and I think we've got to build from our heartland and move out. And ultimately, as we get traction in a fuller sense in the context of the major retail players in the industry that are certainly at the table having discussions with us right now, then I think what we're in a position to do is then think beyond the internal to the consumer itself. And I think we'd all agree there's an absolute need to influence in that space. Because unfortunately, we're in a business where if you go back 20, 25 years, you think of someone in a trench coat knocking on your door selling yourself a life policy, and today you think about a furry meerkat. All right, so we've got some challenges to overcome as an industry, and part of that is actually ensuring that our retail staff that touch the consumer have a sufficient level of base training of insurance to ensure they can have an engaged conversation with the consumer in the right way, and it's recognised as such. But I think we're a little way short of that at the moment. And I think that's the opportunity that we have if we get this journey right, moving from commercial heartland into the retail space. But there's more to do.
Again, I'd like to remind you all that if you want to ask a question of our esteemed panel, you have a kind of about 10 or so minutes to get your question in. But turning back to the questions which have already been submitted, there's a question here from Malcolm Lee of 10 Insurance Services. And their question is, small brokers have major concerns about the time and cost of achieving chartered status. He agrees with Amanda that they need help, but he asks how can this be achieved? And I suppose, as you were mentioning there, Amanda, if I come to you first on that.
Well, I do think that that is where the insurers can help, because, for example, you know, if you create a Chartered Broker Academy and the broker's saying we have a desire to do this, then clearly that will allow the achievement of CPD points, which will help. Some small organisations can't always run training sessions; they just don't have the critical mass to be able to do that. So I think that's where the insurers can really help, piggybacking the training programmes that they've already got in place, because through their attainment of Chartered. So I think it's part of the onus is on the insurers to provide a proposition which will help not only those who have achieved Chartered maintain it, but those who wish to get there to achieve it. So I think there's a big opportunity to do that. But I think I would say to Malcolm, and I know that, you know, that his is a very professional organisation, that it's probably not as bad as the brokers think. You know, sometimes perception and reality are two very different things, and you can look at it and think, you know, blinging it, that's going to be a bit tough to get. But actually, when you sit down and do it, you're virtually there. You know, because, you know, we talk a lot about exams, but at the end of the day, I think the point that Steve made earlier, it's about behaviour, it's about professionalism, it's about ethics. And, you know, if you look at the broken population, they display a lot of that behaviour all the time. So you've got to sort of try it and see. I would say, you know, judge it when you've looked at the facts, not just by the perception. That would be my view.
Stuart, would you agree with that?
I would, yeah. I mean, you know, I admire both Zurich and with AXA for achieving charter insurer status as well, because I know, you know, sort of what we had to go through with a relatively smaller organisation in comparison. I think whatever the size of organisation, I think it's a similar challenge, just to differing degrees in different areas. And, you know, any of the brokers out there, I would actively encourage them to look into it. I know that the CII are doing their level best to support them as well. I've been involved in a number of workshops with the CII recently, talking about shared training facilities, whereby the cost is not just for one particular organisation. They can share it across a number of organisations, i.e. pooling the resource and talent to help them. And I think that's something more that we as an industry can do, and share that resource to help everybody achieve, you know, the aspirations, their goals of becoming chartered.
Steve, is that tally out with what the CII is doing at the moment?
Yeah, I think the key message I'm getting is how can we effectively work together to help smaller brokers plan what they need to do to achieve this status. And I'm kind of reflecting on, in a sense, some of the work that we've done in the financial advice market with a number of the main life companies over the last few years. Now, many small brokers will know from IFA colleagues that they might have, or peer IFAs in their local community, that the IFAs are having to go through a process of becoming better qualified, largely as a result of regulatory change. What makes this much more powerful is that this is something that's being done because it's a good thing to do. It's been done because the industry believes in it itself. That's going to harness consumer confidence far more effectively than an environment where the market is being pulled by the regulator towards something. But one of the things that we have done on the life market is work with a number of the main life companies to help deliver training and academies to, in the same way as Amanda's referring to the smaller IFA firms that may not have the training resources themselves to invest significantly. So you get economies of scale by working in collaboration with others, because if we all embrace this, it will make for a bigger whole. And that doesn't prevent people competing within that, but rather than one firm being chartered the next, if everybody goes on the same journey, there's in a sense a kind of security in numbers. Everybody believes it's a good thing, and go through that process together. So we do need to be challenged by Stuart and others about making that more available and more get our message out more proactively.
I suppose this kind of leads on to another question here. This is from Guy Cliffin at Newstead Insurance, and he says, how should brokers contradict the premise that this is just another BS 5750, ISO 9000 or ISO 9001 initiative in which he spends a lot of time and money but to no obvious benefit to his organisation? I suppose that's kind of the sentiment that's coming out there in Guy's question.
Well, the British standards that you refer to are all largely focused on process. And I'm sure that there are many, many benefits to that. We're not talking about changing processes here. We're talking about embracing a culture of professional standards, which other professions are viewed by consumers as having already done. So I think this is about making sure that the CII, the Chartered is made up of components which are relevant to the roles that people are doing. If the components of chartered status are relevant, they'll be seen as adding value. If they're seen as adding value, they're more likely to be promoted by firms to their staff and to their customers. And that's why I'm saying that what we're trying to do is to listen to insurers and brokers as to what tests of knowledge we need to ensure are part of our qualification so that they're relevant, and so that people, when they get them, are very proud about them and can articulate their expertise usefully to external customers. It's not just about process, it's about making it relevant.
And I mean, is there any kind of research or any research any of you have done amongst your brokers who have become chartered to kind of say that there are actually benefits there? I mean, this is essentially what Guy's really getting to, really. Can the community essentially prove to the brokers that there are benefits for him trying to attain the chartered status?
I think it's probably just a little bit too soon yet, isn't it? Because if you think, I think the traction is about, there's about 15 brokers a quarter signing up to, is that right, to chartered? Have I got those numbers right there?
It's accelerating now.
Yeah, but it's sort of accelerating. So I think that, you know, it's gathering momentum, but I think it's not been in place long enough to, you know, I can understand brokers always want to prove everything by numbers, but sometimes it's not just about the numbers. Sometimes it's about, you know, knowing that it's the right thing to do and sort of almost trusting that having chartered in this time where, let's face it, reputationally insurance is not in a great place, has got to be better than not being chartered, you know. So I don't think we have the evidence yet. I think it's just a bit too soon. But I think we're all keen, you know, no better than big organisations. We like a good old cost-benefit analysis, you know. But sometimes it's just knowing it's the right thing to do is the way to do it. Not very helpful, but...
I agree with that, and I think, you know, there's also in the adage, you know, do it unto yourselves before others do it unto you.
Yeah, very true.
So I think there is something in the fact that there's a recognition that we need to improve the overall professional standing of insurance and how it's perceived. I think it isn't a kite mark that's process orientated. You've met and you've done this. It's very much more content orientated to the people that are the profession, and therefore I think there is value just in the context of having professional development standards that we wrap around our people. And ultimately, you know, our products and services as insurers are only as good as they're interpreted and relayed to our end customers. And it's in the interests of both, you know, insurer and brokers to work together to make that the most effective proposition in the market and be recognised for what ultimately we sell. So, you know, I think there has to be some belief in the system. I don't think it's going to be entirely empiric, but, you know, we're all sat here, none of us necessarily with 100% CBA, but I think we can generally, you know, use the CEO gut type approach to know that it's the right thing to do.
In this, I know I keep referring to this survey. It's only because the brief's just been given to me, and it's only just been. We'll be publishing this shortly, but I think to re-emphasise what we've just been saying, at the moment, the very, very high proportions of chartered firms are talking about how this makes them feel good, how the perception of customers has improved, and how it's made significant difference to their brand, both from their customers' perspective and from their staff's perspective. But already, despite the fact it's early days, nearly half of chartered brokers believe that this has actually played a key role in helping them win new business. Now, I wouldn't lead on that from the CII's perspective, because this isn't necessarily just about numbers. It's about creating a profession and building a brand. But I think that's a relatively good statistic at a relatively early stage in the life of chartered broker.
I was going to say, we are now getting some of the polls working, and so I have a result here for who benefits most from being a firm, being a chartered insurer. And the result here was 42.8% said the employees, and no one said the customers, no one said the brokers. The most popular answer was 57.1% for everyone that deals with them, which kind of indicates the customers and the brokers and everyone actually kind of enrolled in there. I mean, does that result really kind of tally what you think would be the answer there?
I think it does, absolutely.
Yeah. So just to let you know that the final poll question will be going live shortly, and this poll is, just push that through. Is what do you believe is the main driver, it's actually going back to the start now, what do you believe is the main driver for the present move to chartered by the insurance profession? Is it regulatory pressure, competitive pressure, an individual firm's management, the CI's agenda, or another? So we've got about another 9 or 10 minutes. If you get your answer into that, it would be much appreciated. So really, it's what do you think is the main driver, the present move towards chartered? If we come to another question from one of the viewers out there, this question comes from Matt Bramley of the AGP Partnership. And he says, really, unless we have real standards that are enforceable, perhaps with some striking off, then we'll never be able to compare with other professions and regarded rightly with suspicion by the public. Do you think that'll ever happen? And what needs to be done to kind of perhaps make people see the insurance as a profession as opposed to other professions, whether it's law or the medical profession? Stuart?
Yeah, we've already gone through a renewal of our chartered insurer status, and I have to say it certainly wasn't a tick box exercise by any stretch of the imagination. All the information that we had to collate and present when we first applied for chartership still applied, but when we came to do the renewal of that, further and better information was required, and I felt that that particular procedure and that process was quite rigorous, and rightly so, because I believe that it's a continuation, it's a journey, and you know, if your organisation isn't performing as it should do to tick all the boxes to become and maintain that chartership, then you know they should be reviewed and potentially struck off if that's the case.
Amanda, do you?
I mean, I wholeheartedly agree with this, and we have this debate quite regularly at the Ordinary Declaration Task Force about, you know, you have to be serious about it. And I do believe there is a piece of work which is ongoing currently at the CII, which is looking at this, and Steve can probably articulate that better than I can.
There is, yeah, and I think, you know, aside from ethics, CPD and qualifications, having the ability to withdraw something as well as grant something, so there being consequences of not conducting oneself in the right manner as a chartered firm, there has to be consequences. Otherwise, the thing won't be worth the paper that it's written on. We do withdraw chartered status as well as grant it. We withdraw chartered status from individuals, and we have withdrawn chartered status from firms as well, whether it is because they no longer fit the criteria or because something's gone wrong. Perhaps what we need to do going forward is to again communicate that a little bit more proactively. But it's absolutely a key component of a true profession. Professionals will not want other members of the profession spoiling it for them. Things like whistleblowing and preservation of standards is key for the profession as a whole. But again, let's not forget, we're on a journey. We're starting out here, but for sure, make no bones about it, we do withdraw chartered status as well as grant it. And indeed, the renewal process is one area where people will need to make sure that they continue to fulfil the criteria. And we will ask those questions thoroughly.
Can I just ask you, I mean, do all of you think that that's an achievable ambition, and ultimately the insurance is seen as a profession alongside other professions, whether it's medical, legal, accountancy? So,
I mean, we've got the journey theme rolling through this, and I think we need to recognise that we are in catch-up, no question. So, I mean, it's a very, very good question. Now, you know, you look at chartered accountants, you know, Royal Ascenting, whatever it was, 1880. I mean, there's quite a long period of solidifying the framework that underpins that profession, and you can go to other chartered organisations and find the same type of underpinning framework. Now, I think we are on the right road in the context of mobilising traction around getting chartered status for the professional standings that we aspire for. We are clearly going through a process that is fairly rigorous in the reapplication process, but ultimately this will only ever start to move towards a position that has similar standing when you actually take it away. It means something, and at this moment in time you take it away, you can still trade, be it as an insurer or a broker. Okay, so if we're honest with ourselves, the longer term, and it's not going to be in the next few years because it would need to get embedded traction and the rest, it would need to be embodied and enshrined in the context of the way insurance is regulated in this market, such that if ultimately you fail to meet the requirements, that means you cannot trade. And until such a time as that takes place, if we're honest with ourselves, it will not have the same standing as other chartered firms. When you're struck off as a chartered accountant or a doctor, you're out of business. And I think ultimately that has to be the acid test long term. I don't think we're ready for that on the journey that we're on, but I think we need to always hold that up as a mirror to ourselves, because against that final test, that's the test. Yeah? And we're not ready for that type, and I think we've got the right traction and the right direction of travel. I think we need to see where we land.
Do you think the regulator will ever take kind of enough interest in this to actually kind of see through what Stephen was perhaps kind of getting on there? The regulator will essentially drive the kind of move towards chartered.
Well, I think it's a bit early for me to sort of claim that the regulator is about to do something in the general insurance market. And I don't think that's a problem, because I think that there's something a lot more powerful about the industry taking responsibility for driving activity itself. But I do think that, again, one further look at what's happened recently in the context of the retail distribution review on the life side, it isn't just enhanced qualifications that the regulator is expecting IFAs and other financial advisory firms to progress. It's also now created something called accredited, it's also, shall I say, recognised accredited bodies, of which the Chartered Insurance Institute is one, and it's delegated to the CII and a number of other organisations the role of validating continuous professional development for every regulated investment advisor. And therefore, in the life sector or in the financial advice sector, if people do not pursue a relevant programme of formalised CPD on an annualised basis and declare that to their relevant professional body, there are major consequences for them. So it isn't just law and medicine where that applies. There are some markets that are very close to home. It would be a bit premature for me to say that's about to arrive in the general insurance sector, because I think it's important that the market that creates an industry-led solution. But you don't have to look too far away to see these sorts of initiatives being introduced by the regulator. CPD, high levels of expertise and ethical practice, and the ability to lose something as well as gain something is what you find in a profession. So let's see, and I think that we're in the process now of embracing that opportunity ourselves, and I think that will create a very positive impression with the regulator for the general insurance sector.
Because I'll move on to the result for the last poll here, which we did ask actually, what did you, the audience, believe was the main driver for the present to move to chartered by the insurance profession? Interestingly, regulatory pressure came out with joint second with 27.2, along with the CI's agenda. The kind of fourth most popular answer, or third, was competitive pressure. The most popular actual answer here was individual firms management. So obviously it was the people at the top really driving that on, which I'm sure might be borne out in some of your experiences, would you say?
Well, that completely bears out the experience, and I think that's important. It should be led by the leadership team. You know, it's really important.
So I suppose, really to kind of come to a conclusion, really, I suppose we need to ask, is attaining charter status an end in itself? I mean, is that the end of the journey? And if not, where do we go from here? Perhaps I can start with you, Stuart.
No, I think as we've all talked about this journey, and I think we're a couple of steps into that journey. We've made comparison to other chartered professions, and I think we've got some way to go. But at least we've started down a particular route, one that I wholeheartedly agree with, as do the rest of the panel, I should imagine. And I think that's something that we own our own development, we own our own industry, and I think this is something that we should continue to do.
I'll come to you next, Steve.
I think achieving charter status is an important stage in that process, but making the most of chartered status, making the most of it as for the benefit of staff, making the most of it for the benefit of customers, and indeed wider, and making the most of it for the profession as a whole is the really important thing to do, I think.
Amanda?
I mean, I think we're just at the very, very beginning, and I think it's an important milestone. It had to be done, but we've got quite a long way to go yet. But, do I believe we can do it? Absolutely.
And finally come to you, Steve.
Oh, sure, there's a lot to add to my esteemed colleagues around the table. So I think, we are at the start. We've got the right direction. I think, we laid out the acid test for long-term success. And I think we look to continue to get industry-wide momentum that really positions this industry as it should be positioned. Which is, a professional organisation that delivers to our customers' needs.
Okay, well on that note, unfortunately we've run out of time. Obviously the journey is just beginning, but this is the end of this webinar. So I'd like to thank my esteemed panel of Stuart, Steve, Amanda and Stephen. I'd also like to thank the Chartered Insurance Institute for sponsoring this webinar presentation. Remember, if you want to stay abreast of all developments with regard to the Oldham Declaration and which firms are becoming chartered, remember to check out the news as it breaks on postonline.co.uk and insuranceage.co.uk. That's all from me for now. Until the next webinar, goodbye.